this is Jenny from Just Being Me, and you're listening to the Learning to Love Yourself podcast, the show that inspires you to put yourself first.
Learning to love yourself on the path to happiness. Learning to love yourself on the path to happiness.
Welcome back to our podcast today. I am with the very, very lovely Hayley Perkins. We've actually just had to stop ourselves talking because we needed to get on to recording, and we were just having such an amazing conversation. Hayley, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
So we talk about our journey to the moment where we have an aha moment and realize that actually we can do this differently and feel better. What's that moment for you?
Well, I think I've had a sequence of aha moments.
I can recognize that.
I think let's just maybe give a bit of history about me. I have struggled with eating disorders, disordered eating, body dysmorphia since I was very young. Certainly disordered eating started from around the age of 6, albeit when I look back, Mum definitely showed love with food. There was definitely some associations with food and comfort from a very, very young age. And so at 6, my dad went abroad to work, and that had a massive impact on me. And at that point, I can really see changes in photos. Between the age of 6 and 8, I gained a lot of weight. My mum managed a sweet shop, and I used to go there after work, after school, and I would steal sweets and I would stick them in my rucksack. And then at night, when I was missing my dad terribly, because he used to read us bedtime stories and stuff like that, I would sit and I would eat the food to fill that void that was inside of me. So that set a scene for me, which then opened up a lifetime because I'd gained weight. That then impacted how kids teased me. I was never really bullied, but I was teased. I was called names, and that had an impact on my self-worth. Fast forward to secondary school, all my friends had boyfriends. I was never the attractive one. All of that sort of chips away at your worth and your self-esteem. Then I was an adult. Yeah, every relationship I got into, I was so grateful that they would want a second date, that I would overlook all the red flags. And every relationship I was in, they were unfaithful to me or they were horrible to me. So that kind of abuse just followed me. And the biggest abuse of all was how I abused myself, like with food, with restriction, then you enter the world of diet culture. So I spent the best part of 30 years trying to lose weight because I believed that my weight was the problem. My weight and worth was so closely linked. So aha moments. A big one was actually a boyfriend once said to me, Hayley, if you spent as much time trying to sort your head out as you do your weight. And I can remember looking at him and being quite cross with him because I'd spent so long trying to change how I looked. I kind of felt like he was really discounting all of my hard work. And I've had a couple of things said to me very similar to that, which I kind of do the typical, I've got quite a strong, rebellion side to me, where I go to that automatic, oh, what do you know? But actually, as I sat with that made so much sense. And that was, I'm not sure it was exactly at that moment, but I went into therapy. And interestingly, I went into therapy. I was 19 stone at my heaviest. I'd just come out of a very abusive relationship. Even then, I still blame my weight. He wouldn't have been such a shit. Sorry if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast.
You could swear.
If he wouldn't have been such a shit, if I hadn't been so fat, that was where my head was at. That's how it made me feel. So I went on that quest. Again, 5 years it took me. I lost 8 stone. I got to that elusive size 10, and I can remember pulling on my jeans, feeling amazing. But all of a sudden, I got thrown into a world of men finding me attractive, friends that had been friends that had never fancied me, finding me attractive and asking me out. And it just blew my mind. I couldn't cope with it. It made me feel very unsafe. And I then kind of got caught in this. It's hard enough to maintain weight loss when you've lost it, but when you've got a whole protection stuff going on as well. So I went into a real battle of binging, restricting, OCD flaring up, lots of really difficult, challenging things to navigate. And I was a closed book to the outside world. I always had my pink lippy on, and the outside world thought that they would never have known. I was so closed. So the thought of going into therapy was actually really terrifying for me. the thought of like sharing my story, and I didn't for a long time. And then when I did, it wasn't like this instant cure, but I just started to make that connection that my weight wasn't about food. It wasn't about laziness, greed, lacking willpower. It was my protection. It was my armor. That 8 stone that I carried was like this armor that protected me from the world. So there's definitely been pivotal times. I think another big thing for me was when I started my psychotherapy studies at the Burn Institute. And I knew, it's funny what you're drawn to, isn't it? So transactional analysis is all about childhood messages and the messages we get in children. And I went on like a weekend 101 course, and oh my God, it was just like, it's like they were talking to me. I signed up there and then, and I started my foundation year. And this is what introduced me to inner child work. This is a fundamental part of the work that I do on myself, but also with my clients, and in connecting with that little 6-year-old that lost her dad, who he went away to work, and no one told me. And it got worse because he'd go away, then he'd come back. And because I used to get so upset, they wouldn't tell me. So I had come home from primary school and he'd be gone. And then I'd get lots of ear infections and things like that. Yeah, and my mum was like so not emotional. Bless her, I love her to death, but she's like, pull yourself together. We're Londoners, right? She's harder than that, but she's not. Once she's had a wine, So it would have been that how you couldn't talk about it. If I'd have got upset, she'd have been like, what are you crying about? So there was a lot of stuff that closed down in me at a very young age, and definitely triggered some beliefs around men and how men leave you and stuff like that. And so through the training that I did, because let's face it, I went to sign up to do psychotherapy to learn to work with children and to work with people, not rip my own skin off and poke about. But that's what you have to do. You have to know yourself inside out to be able to hold space for your client.
Absolutely.
So that was a massive aha moment for me when I realized that so much of how I thought about myself stemmed from those early year experiences. And that's not about blaming our parents, but it is about experiencing it from that little girl's perspective, because we're too quick to discount that. We use the word trauma. We talked about this, didn't we? Trauma, that word. It's bandied about a lot, but childhood trauma isn't like abuse and neglect. And of course, some people have experienced that. But my mum threw my favourite teddy away, right? That teddy I told all my secrets to. And I get it. She was fed up with washing it and it was full of holes and whatever. That was a massive trauma for me. And again, it's what we make that mean, isn't it? So those early years are so powerful.
They are indeed. You saying that, my daughter came in, who's 30, and she came in the other day, and I have her Flopsy Bunny on my bookcase. And she went up and she gave Flopsy Bunny some sort of hug, because she's tiny and holy and really in very good condition. But would you like me to mend her? No, because that changes who she is. Mending her when she was a child was different because each little bit came along at the right time, if you saw what I mean. The smell got back in, the touch got back in, all of those things got back in. But she did say to me, could you give her a wash because she does smell a little bit? It's just like, okay, now I can wash her after all those, because it was important to her to have that
safety.
Yeah, to have that still there for her. But now it's okay. So she's had a wash after a lot of years, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this is one of the fundamental things. And this is why inner child work is so powerful, because we kind of lose that. We get to teenage years and the things that help to make us feel safe and soothe us when we were younger, we don't want that anymore. We're too cool for cuddles. We're too cool for all of that stuff that makes us feel safe and secure. And then we grow up and we get into relationships, and the hugging and all the things that make us feel safe stops. In fact, we have the opposite. We create a very unstable internal world, especially like when you struggle with your self-worth and stuff like that. We create a very chaotic internal world, the way we speak to ourselves, how we're not taking care of ourselves, and that all then gets mirrored and projected out and reflected back in the real world. So I actually one of the things I do with my clients when we're doing inner child work is I get them to have cushions and stuff. their own company. I've got my inner child attached to a cushion downstairs, and she's always sat with me in the evenings, and I don't even really think about it now. It's just there. And my inner child is attached to my bracelet. And like if I'm feeling a little bit worried about something, I'll touch it or my hand over my heart. So I have these ways of and they're anchored. You know all about anchored. The moment I do that, it calms me down. And there's such simplistic techniques that are so powerful. And
but it's knowing yourself well enough, isn't it, to know that that's what you need to do for you.
And we can come to it.
Yes, I was just going to say that, because we kind of go, well, I'm an adult now, I don't need to do that anymore. And actually, I am an old adult now, not old, but I'm, done a lot of years at adulting. And actually, I'm really beginning to realize that it's okay for me to really connect with my inner child. It's okay for me to do the things I wanted to do as a child. It's okay for me to understand all of those things. And it's a really special place to be able to go to. I love to reconnect with my little Jennies, as I call them.
It's a beautiful energy, and it's not about being childish. We have different parts. We have these parts of our child, like ego state. We have a parent part, the part that puts boundaries in place and also comforts and nourishes us. We also have these parts. So accepting that we have these parts, and it's not about being in the adult logic, conscious self all of the time, but it is about allowing those other parts to be present in their supportive, compassionate, loving capacity, rather than in the opposite of that. I talk a lot about the outer child as well, and people often look at me then because they've heard about the inner child, but they're not so sure about the outer.
The outer one.
The outer is our teenage self. It's the saboteur, it's the rebel, and often we look at sabotage and we're quite unkind to ourselves about it. But actually, she does an awesome job because she's protecting the inner child. She's doing, with my eating, she genuinely thought that when I was upset, feeding my inner child was a way of calming her and making her feel better. And also the protection that she created through the weight. So when we actually start to understand these different parts, it's magical. And it is about it's about toning down the parts that aren't serving us anymore and amplifying the parts like joy. The more it's not actually rocket science. It's in those small moments of bringing, when I look at children, they'll have a little ladybird on their finger, and they can spend 10 minutes looking at that ladybird and just be in absolute awe and mesmerized by that little ladybird. What happens to us? Where do we lose that sense of wonder?
And I don't know if you saw my post, it'll be a little while back, but when this comes out, about swimming with a 10-year-old the other day. And just, I've gone into the pool because I've got a long journey to go, and I just thought I'll go swimming and I'll get my exercise because I'm going to be slat. And actually I ended up with a very lovely 10-year-old who was asking me questions like, can you do a handstand? Can you do somersaults? How far can you swim underwater? And do you know what? I had the best time. I think it was only about 10 minutes. It felt ages, but I had the best time because I'm going, I wonder if I can still do a handstand. Oh, how many somersaults can I do? And he was amazing because he's going, wow, that's amazing. Well done. He wasn't going me. He was going, you've done this. Wow. And it was just a perfect moment to reconnect, because I then had to drive for about 7 hours, and I got home and thought, I don't feel that. I was really expecting to be exhausted, sitting in the car. I mean, obviously I've done my breaks and what have you, but it's still a long time in the car. And actually I got home and thought, I feel okay doing that swim with the wonderful Jensen.
Amazing.
And it's just allowing yourself, because I think we spend a lot of time when we're with children telling them what to do. This is how we do it. As against, it's a really lovely connection when you're with a child and just let them lead you.
They're gifts. They're gifts of reminding us of, how we used to be, and of course, some of us didn't have loving, safe childhoods.
Absolutely.
But you know what? We are so resilient. And this is the thing. I often talk about something called injunctions and drivers. And it's like we're born into our families with a preset book of rules, societal rules, traditions, family rules. So we're kind of being conditioned from day one of birth. And so we separate from who we really are, and we create the ego. And we talk about ego, and we often liken that to how they've got a big ego. But ego is just our constructed self. It's the outer child, actually. I forgot why I was telling you that. Why was I telling you that, Jen?
I have no idea. What beautiful moments with the brain.
Drivers are like, this one I was going back to as children. We're so adaptable. So we learn to live in our families, right? So it's about attachment and being safe and performing and getting attention and stuff. So we learn to please others, because there's nothing better if you keep your mum happy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good thing. Being strong. I learned to not show my feelings because my mum couldn't handle it. So I'd go in my bedroom and bite my cushion so she couldn't hear me. She would say that typical, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry for. I don't know what that actually meant. I'm sure she wouldn't. But I would bite my cushion, and all of a sudden you just remove the cushion. You just stop feeling those feelings. Yeah. I definitely had to be perfect. If I got 70% in a test, it was, why didn't you get 80%? I'm sure it wasn't quite like that, but that's what I heard. And so I was constantly, and I've spent most of my career striving, climbing that ladder, the promotion, the house, the car, and I've burnt out twice because that's my ego. That was my ego that needed that to feel okay in the world. So we learn this as children. We become very resilient, and it does help us to do okay in our families. But when we're still doing those behaviors 20, 30, 40 years later, that has a big impact.
I think that's where your journey changes, when you do have that aha moment of, actually, I don't need to behave like this. I don't need to behave like the person I was when I was doing whatever behaviors it was to feed your ego. I don't need to behave like that anymore. And it's that question, well, I wonder what will happen if. And just seeing.
I think as well that whole, I think I've had a lot of moments where I've known, like, you're at the crossroads, aren't you? And you keep on going down the same old path. And I've sort of, it reminds me of that poem by Portia Nelson, The Hole in the Road, I think it's called. And it talks about addiction and changing behaviors. And we walk down the street, we fall in the hole. We climb out, we walk down the street, we know the hole's there, but we still fall in it. We walk down the street, we know the hole's there, we jump in it. We walk down the street, we walk round the hole, we take a different street. That's a very quick version of it, but it's so true. I think sometimes we gain awareness and we know that what we're doing isn't serving us, but it takes time to shift. Certainly for me, around my food, and the food side of things was actually easier to change than my perception of my body. That is still an ongoing thing. I spent a lot of time hating my body to motivate me to be slimmer. So looking at myself naked in the morning, so I didn't eat in the day. So there was a lot of really deep-rooted stuff around how I looked. And that's been much harder to work on, actually, than learning to be kinder around food. And that's been a challenge. I was a binge eater. I was never anorexic. I was never sick, but I binged. I restricted for days. It was at its peak. It was pretty horrific. And if you know anyone who's been in that world, it's so shameful. It's so shameful. And I would eat if I was going out, and then eat very, very little, depending on where I was in my cycle of it. Was I binging or was I restricted? If I was restricting, I just wouldn't ever go out for meals. But if I was eating out, I'd eat before I went, and then I'd order a salad, and then I'd be sat there in my head thinking, as if they think you eat salads. I'm sat here at 19 stone, so my head was just constantly full. So I think for me, and I think it's the same for most people, they have the awareness first, but those changes take time, because you've got the constant trigger from people around you. I know that I'd attracted people into my world based on who I was. I was the people pleaser. I was the one that did everything for everybody. And then when you're starting to change that about yourself, people don't like it. And that's really scary, because I know I've got anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. Yeah. So if I felt like I'd upset someone, I couldn't bear it. So I kept going round and round that cycle.
Yeah.
But you're learning a bit about yourself. And this is why lapsing is, we're so hard on ourselves if we lapse or fall off the wagon, whatever we want to call it.
You're kind of feeling like that's it. I've failed. That's it. There's no more. But actually, you just go around again.
We're not,
New knowledge again.
we're not very good at like that 10-year-old, speaking. We would shower that 10-year-old with love and praise and all of that stuff. But when it comes to us, we don't do that. This is one of the biggest things we've changed. The change itself and maintaining that change is one thing. How we judge the falling off the wagon, if you like, has a huge impact. And that's the bit that really creates the fear to try again. Because, the brain, it's pain and pleasure, isn't it? And if we are constantly creating this trauma response, if you like, it's no wonder we then fear trying again. So there is layers to change. I think it's part of it is understanding and awareness of what needs to change, but also just helping people to understand that it takes time.
Absolutely. And it's also, I mean, when you look back I'm thinking specifically about learning to ride the bike. You're on the bike, you fall off, you're on the bike, you fall off. And sometimes it needs to be of enough value to you. So learning to ride the bike was of great value to me because I could go and play with all the other people out there in the street that were riding their bikes around, other than just sitting on the pavement waiting for them to pass. Learning to ride my bike was really important. Socially important. I could be part of what was going on outside. And it because it became that important, it warranted all of those times where I got hurt because I fell off, So it's understanding that actually it's that same process, even though you're an adult. You can't just get it suddenly right.
It is. And we were talking about secondary gains earlier. What are the benefits for people to stay stuck in that place that they say they don't want to be in? And that's very relevant for domestic abuse.
Yeah.
I know I stayed in a very abusive relationship for many years, partly because it was better the devil this was a story I told myself, but also around weight. There was huge benefits for me for staying fat, because men didn't find me attractive. Conscious mind didn't want that. That's all I wanted, to be in a relationship, but subconsciously it absolutely served me. So it's complex, isn't it? And we get it when we look at that analogy of riding a bike, absolutely. But when it's, for some things, it's fundamental, isn't it? It's survival. For me, my weight helped me survive.
And it's interesting in the fact how we put those together, isn't it? Because, at one point in my life, I was 6 stone. And I was 6 stone because I was dreadfully unhappy. And when you connect those things together, you can see how you see life, can't you? When you connect yourself, for me, so, being really skinny is unhappiness.
That's really common. And that's something I talk about a lot when clients will say, God, I was so thin on my wedding day, or, I look at photos of me. I didn't have photos of me when I was bigger because I was so ashamed. So, of course, when I'm thinner, I want all the photos. And I can remember certainly 10, 15 years ago, and I'd look at photos and I'd go, oh, look how thin I am there, as if that's the magic.
Yeah.
But actually, when I look into my eyes and I see how insecure I was, what I was going through in my life, what I'd gone through to get thinner, because I always did it in ways that were really quite unhealthy and certainly not nurturing. It's no wonder the minute you think about losing weight, the subconscious is resisting it. And this is really important to help people to see that weight is just, it's irrelevant. It's about how you feel. It's about, I know people who are overweight, they are strong mentally, physically and emotionally. And I love that, because I tell you what, my mental health and my emotional health were affected far more because of my experiences with diet culture than my weight ever was.
Yeah.
Would have caused me a problem. But it's so hard. And even when you've detached yourself from it, we still have to live in the world of diet culture, where people are talking about.
It is, and we're coming to that time of year again, aren't we? We're coming to the January where, we're all going to have diet stuff thrust.
New year, what is it? New year, new you, whatever it.
And it's such a massive thing that we're all, and you look at social media and this is the way you're supposed to look and this is what you're supposed to do. You and I were having the discussion today about me, because I'm going to be I am weightlifting and I'm going to achieve a certain point by the time that I'm 60, which I just bust today because I was going to do 6 by the time I was 60. So I'm not yet 58 and I've done 80 kilograms. And that's all about the fact that actually it's not about losing weight for me at all. It's about being strong enough to get into my old age. It's about being strong enough to be able to do the older years of my life easily. It's about a completely different thing than actually losing weight. What it is doing is toning my body, changing the shape of my body, because my body is a lot stronger now.
And what a lovely shift in focus. You know, when I think about how much I thought about my weight, food, all of that stuff, you know, what a waste of life.
Yeah.
I recorded a podcast with, I think it was Lisa Newport, and she told a story, I can't remember. Oh no, it was Viv actually. She went to Slimming World and there was a lady there, an older lady that used to weigh everybody. And she'd been away this weekend and Viv had said, oh, did you have a good time? She said, oh, it was great, but I put 5 pounds on. That lady died that night.
Yeah.
And Viv said, how sad that the last thing she'd said to her was about gaining weight. She'd gone away, she'd had a lovely weekend, but she'd gained a few pounds.
Yeah.
And that was still on her mind in her dying day.
Yeah, because that is the culture, isn't it? And actually, the culture needs to be about how good do you feel? Being in the moment, looking at the ladybird on the end of your finger.
Absolutely.
You know, just...
I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to be consumed by the scales, how I think my body needs to look. It's not about ignoring health and well-being, but like you say, it's about focusing on it as wellness in its whole thing: spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. Physical is just a part. Weight is only partly physical. The rest is like emotional, mental, and spiritual. We're not just physical beings. We have all of that. And, you know, and I know for me personally, the moment I've shifted my focus and I've focused on eating little and often, that's pretty much it. I don't restrict any foods. I'm active, but I'm never going to be a gym bunny, but I walk the dogs, I play with the dogs, I move about and things like that. But the biggest thing is I focus on my emotional and my mental health. And since then, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm cured. I'm certainly around food. I love food. You know, of course I eat bits here and there, but I don't turn to food when I'm upset anymore, or alcohol. There's been lots of different coping mechanisms I've turned to. I still get pulled into like the body image stuff, getting older like you. I mean, I'm 53 this month. I love that. You know, yeah, I love it. I love getting older.
From the age perspective, for me, it's about the fact that I have all of that experience behind me. I look at my children in their 30s and think, oh yeah, I remember that. I look at people, you know, have a lot to do with teenagers, and I look at them and I think, yeah, I remember that too. You know, and actually it's really quite nice not to get involved in all of the drama of that, because actually by the time that I've got into my 50s, I've kind of gone, oh, I don't need that. And actually I concentrate on how I feel, not how anybody else feels. And not from a selfish perspective, but from the inner piece of me.
It's that moment of pause, isn't it?
It is.
It really is a beautiful thing. And, you know, this is what we need to be teaching in schools. And I can see it starting to happen. There's a lot of awesome people out there that want to do some amazing work. And I think we are going into a decade of going to see incredible shifts. And you and I are lucky enough to be part of that, aren't we? You know, you work in the area you work in, and I work in the area I work in, and you know, that's all we can do. We can keep sharing our messages, doing the work on ourselves, and then sharing that with people. And it's magical that we get to help people make these changes, isn't it?
And it is one of those wonderful moments, isn't it, when you see that shift, the very first shift of understanding. And it's like, yes, because it's like a light goes on behind the eyes, you know, that suddenly there's a soul going, yes, this is where I want to go. And it's an amazing thing. And we are very, very lucky. And on that note, Hayley, I'm going to let everybody know that all of your contact ways and beings, social media, website, all of those sorts of things will be down below. So if you like what you've heard from Hayley, go check her out, please do. Thank you so much for being with us today, Hayley.
Thank you.
Are you feeling stuck? Do you want to be able to create a better conversation with yourself, but just don't know where to start? I offer a free 20-minute session to see where you want to be and how to get you there. Just click on the link below. Remember, it's free. Book your space. It could change your life. Thanks for listening today. If you'd like to know more, you can find all the links down below. Oh, and don't forget to press subscribe so you can catch the next one. See you soon.